Welcome back to another episode of Second ID. Today, I'd like to discuss a bit more. I'd like to actually develop on the ideas I've been discussing in the previous episodes. So I have talked about how important it is to open to new possibilities to initially in your second language acquisition journey. How important it is to make mistakes and correct yourself and listening carefully to the native speakers of the language, and how important it is to be willing to make those mistakes and learn your lessons from those mistakes. Every time you make grammar errors while writing or speaking, you're willing to be corrected. You're willing to have somebody correct you, or you can be self-critical of yourself and then correct yourself as well if you know the rules. So you start out by being open to new possibilities. You try different ways of expressing yourself. So although you make a lot of mistakes on your journey while you're trying, um, so it's unavoidable. You make mistakes, and then you'll have you'll you'll have somebody correct you, or eventually you'll have to correct yourself. So this is the topic of the day, um, where our openness will have to readjust itself readjust yourself to submit to the existing rules of the language. As you all know, we don't really question the validity or the correctness or preciseness of the language. We just speak or use in different forms of communication. We therefore blindly accept and use what's readily available to us in any languages you speak. Our innate inventiveness with the language and openness to novel approaches to communication die with it. So first we started by being open, but then at some point, as you're learning, as you progress, you have to kind of readjust the level of creativity or inventiveness to fit in within the culture and the language, and because nobody would understand you if you just create your own language. So there are rules that you have to follow, and then you have to adjust yourself to it. Um, so so from then on, your creativity regresses, eventually closing the door of possibility. First, we start by being open to new possibilities. Now, as we progress, we'll have to let our creativity intuitiveness diminish to a certain extent, um, as long as we learn those rules without the interference of our own self creativity and intuitiveness. This happens because the language is institutional. It is legitimate, and it is shared by the whole community who speak the language. You don't want to isolate yourself by speaking a language that is not really comprehensible to the rest of the people. Um, so the following the rules is necessary as you learn another language. Therefore, your initial approach, which is the openness to the new possibility, we have to die with you making progress along the way. You might be asking then, what now? Let's say you have reached the level of native like fluency, and you still like to maintain your creativity and intuitiveness in learning new things, not just limited to learning another language or acquiring another language. You like to maintain your pure childlike creativity and intuitiveness. What can we do about it? So you can express your creativity from now on once you acquire another language through different forms of communication, say art forms, painting, drawing, whatever, writing. making your own fiction books, whatever you call it. You can try different approaches to maintaining your creativity. But once you acquire another language, you have to stick to the rules. So you're sort of you're submissive to it. Actually, your creativity in speaking the language does not really exist anymore because you have to stick to the rules. You have to follow those rules, whatever you do with the language. Of course, when you make up a story, for example, if you're a writer, you can create a story, but you still have to follow those rules of the grammar. You can't just create another language and expecting people to understand you. For example, if you're like Shakespeare, Shakespeare created another many, not many, I'm not really sure. I guess many lexes, some new vocabulary in his stories, but he did so in a way that is readily understandable, giving enough context of the story to the people so that the reader can understand what's going on from the context, so that it's easier for the reader to understand what the definition of the word really is. So, given the context, it's possible, but the final decision is only made by the public or the speakers or the group of speakers or the community as a whole, who would either accept the new rule or new vocabulary or not, right? So it's always comes down to the majority who will decide to whether accept a new vocabulary or a new grammar rule. So it's the people who speak the language, use the language, who will decide what is possible and or impossible, acceptable, unacceptable in any given circumstances. So let's recap a bit. In our previous episode, I often brought up about how children learn their first language. They're limitless. They try many different methods, their own ways of communicating ideas. They're using a lot of body language and facial expressions. If they don't have the vocabulary or the words to express themselves in their repertoire, they will make up ways to convey their thoughts to others. So so they cannot help being creative when they learn their first language in this way. There's the subconscious of trying different variations of grammar and vocabulary until somebody corrects them. They play with the language, basically. That's what it is. And then until the point when adults or their parents would correct them and teach them how to say things properly. Because their brains are like such free-flowing entities, always talking to themselves and saying like anything is possible. There are no rules, and without they are not really aware of social stigma or restraints or dogmatic belief system, as adults know and aware. They don't have any past life experiences. They don't have much. They don't have much of strong concept of what it's like to be humiliated when making mistakes in public. They don't have anything like that. So that allows them to speak freely without really sticking to any rules. And then when a person, grown-ups, appear to correct them, they start listening, and then they become a bit more. They kind of their creativity start dying down slowly as they progress in acquiring their first language. So this process, these different stages of acquisition, have to. So we have to go through these different stages. So otherwise, we only scratching the surface of the whole learning process, the language acquisition. You have to go through this painful, well, rather humiliating experience. First, you start out as a like open-minded child, and then you'll get to the point where you're being corrected by native speakers of the language. But you might question: is it really humiliation when you making mistakes in public places? You can't even open a bank account in another language, another country. That's really depends on how you perceive it. That's how we learn things in general, not only just learning another language, but also in any endeavors uh, in our lives. So if you have a passion for learning another language and being understood by people with different backgrounds, and you get excited about it, and then you take great pleasure being able to learn different cultures and languages, and being able to communicate with those people from different cultures, then you rather, I don't know, I myself enjoy the process. Hope you guys perceive it whole journey as the same way as I did.